Tim Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank in service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there!" and then ran.
Greg Gutfeld just shredded Tim Walz into political scraps with a roast so pointed it could cut right through Minnesota's bloated red tape. From failed leadership and empty virtue signaling to turning the state into a running joke of broken policies, Gutfeld doesn't hold back. If you thought Walz was just another typical Democratic governor, think again. This takedown lays bare every blunder, contradiction, and mess made for show. Get ready for a harsh critique of leadership gone off the rails with Gutfeld sparing no punches.
Gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity.
Tim Walz runs Minnesota. Like a fill-in teacher who just figured out the class knows the material better than he does. But instead of stepping back and learning, he digs in with all the swagger of a whiteboard warrior and none of the outcomes. Greg Gutfeld doesn't need a marker to lay this out. He's armed with enough wit and facts to turn Walz's policy. Misfires into a comedy set for anyone who's ever looked at Minnesota and wondered, when did this place turn into California with extra mosquitoes?
With Walz, it's hard to even bring him up. He has a resting snitch face. You know? I mean, he forfeited his man card during COVID and the riots. And you're right. And also, at that diner, of course, he left early. So don't you find it weird?
Let's start with leadership poor, whatever Tim Walz has been doing instead. The guy governs like he's afraid to make a decision, preferring to hand off responsibility to task forces, committees, or some dude in a Patagonia vest named Kyle. Gregg notes that Walz is the kind of leader who reads the manual after the IKEA table falls apart, then blames the uneven carpet instead of admitting he messed up.
Now, Walz is weird, but he disguises it under the costume of phony compassion, a fake politician who masks destructive ideas under the guise of empathy. At a 2017 town hall, he implied 10-year-old boys should be able to invade girls' bathrooms because it's all about safety. Quote, "As a teacher, my number one responsibility in the classroom is the safety, security, and belongingness of every single child."
For during the 2020 riots, while parts of Minneapolis were literally burning, Tim Walz showed about as much urgency as someone late to a Zoom call because they couldn't find their webcam. Greg nails the scene. Chaos in the streets, businesses wrecked, and Walz responding like he just spilled his coffee. He didn't just pause. He froze like a deer caught in progressive headlights. His version of taking charge, waiting to see CNN's reaction before delivering a carefully worded shrug.
This is a guy who says that he stands for public safety, but actively encouraged the rioters who burned down Minneapolis.
And that is a claim the Republican ticket is trying to hammer home about Governor Tim Walz. He is to blame for Minneapolis burning in 2020.
Is any of that true? David Schuman has new reporting tonight about what exactly Governor Walz did during those fateful few days.
Unfortunately, Memorial Day evening in Minneapolis was anything but peaceful, and neither was last night. Minneapolis and St. Paul are on fire. The fire's still smoldering in our streets.
Gutfeld dives into Walz's riot response or complete lack of win with enough sarcasm to fill a pothole the size of Hennepin County. While small business owners were boarding up their storefronts and holding their breath, Walz was too busy perfecting his empathy statement. Greg jokes that the only curfew Walz enforced was on basic common sense. Looting, riots, destruction. That wasn't treated like a crisis, that was called a community expression. The National Guard was deployed so late they probably had to catch an Uber to the scene.
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on DEI, and we let them define what woke is. We got ourselves in this mess because we weren't bold enough to stand up and say, "You damn right we're proud of these policies. We're going to put them in." and we're going to execute them.
So, wait, you lost because you weren't woke enough?
Let's talk about crime. Under Tim Walz, crime rates have been climbing like they're trying to flee his leadership. But don't worry, he's got solutions. Redefining terminology, gaslighting the public, and insisting the problem is just about public perception. Greg slices through the nonsense. You don't need a degree in criminology to know things are getting worse when you feel like you need a bodyguard just to buy cereal. In Minneapolis, carjackings are practically a competitive sport now. And Walz responds like he's narrating a wildlife documentary, calm, distant, and totally useless. On policing, Greg doesn't pull any punches. Walz played both sides, echoing defund the police slogans to keep activists happy while quietly hoping someone else would clean up the mess. It's a political juggling act that would make a gymnast dizzy, throw cops under the bus, and act shocked when they don't want to show up. Minnesota under Walz turned into a patchwork of ever-shifting restrictions, mandates and executive orders that changed more often than a teenager's mood. Greg jokes that Walz handed out so many mixed messages, people needed a decoder ring just to figure out how to buy groceries. Liquor stores? Open? Gyms closed? Want a tattoo? Sure, but don't even think about sitting in a church pew. Approach to public health felt like throwing darts. Blindfolded in a dark room while someone kept spinning the dartboard.
We're here today because an unspeakable tragedy has unfolded in Minnesota. My good friend and colleague, Speaker Melissa and her husband Mark, were shot and killed early this morning in what appears to be a politically motivated assassination. Our state lost a great leader, and I lost a dearest of friends. My prayers also go out to State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette, who were each shot multiple times. The Hoffmans are out of surgery at this time and receiving care, and we are cautiously optimistic they will survive this assassination attempt. This was an act of targeted political violence. Peaceful discourse is the foundation of our democracy. We don't settle our differences with violence or at gunpoint.
Brutal. Small businesses were treated like public threats, while big box stores got the green light to cash in without missing a beat. Greg jokes that under Walz essential meant massive corporations, and non-essential meant you. Family-owned shops were choked by regulations, while Target and Amazon raked in profits big enough to buy their own country. The hypocrisy? So thick you could ice skate on a tan knowing Minnesota. Someone probably did. Now let's talk education. Because if there's one thing Tim Walz loves more than a blue ribbon panel, it's pretending to fix schools by tossing money at administrators while completely ignoring whether students are actually learning. On his watch, test scores tanked faster than his approval ratings. And then there's the curriculum chaos. Under Walz, Minnesota classrooms turned into ideological obstacle courses, where reading, writing, and arithmetic took a backseat to gender unicorns and pronoun charts. Math class? More like identity studies with a side of subtraction.
Active Politico writes this piece on the body language from the debate, claiming that it speaks volumes. Yeah, it says that Walz lost, but one of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Greg doesn't hold back, he says. Kids in Minnesota are graduating with about as much critical thinking ability as a slice of toast. The education system isn't gearing them up for the real world. It's prepping them for a lifetime of group therapy sessions and overpriced activism. And then there are the taxes. Under Walz, Minnesota became one of the highest taxed states in the country because nothing says a booming economy like squeezing every last penny out of hardworking families. Greg jokes that Walz treats tax increases the way Oprah treats giveaways. Walz manages the state's finances like a kid with his first credit card and a shopping cart full of pie-in-the-sky ideas, multi-million-dollar diversity programs, climate plans that sound like discarded sci-fi scripts, and endless funding for departments that exist just to create paperwork about other departments. The guy could balance a budget if you handed him a calculator, a time machine, and a lobotomy. Injury.
Minnesota State Rep Leigh Finke, who wants to train more children's doctors on sex change surgery and puberty blockers. He sponsored the Trans Refuge Bill, which Walz signed, which makes Minnesota a sanctuary state for such butchery.
The climate agenda. Tim Walz casts himself as Captain Planet's middle-aged cousin, trying to save the planet one tax hike at a time. Greg rolls his eyes harder than a toddler denied a cookie. Under Walz, Minnesota's green energy push looked less like progress, and more like a bureaucratic piñata swing wildly and hope something breaks. Billions were spent, results were minimal, and the power grid is one snowstorm away from total collapse. But hey, he's got windmill emojis in his bio. Transportation under Walz is just as laughable. The state poured millions into light rail. Projects that never arrive on schedule, cost more than the moon landing, and serve fewer people than a lemonade stand in January. Greg points out that under Walz, public transit became a fancy way to burn money with extra steps. Instead of addressing the root problems, Walz's administration hands out pamphlets, hires consultants, and holds community meetings where everyone vents. But nothing actually changes. The only thing growing faster than the homeless population is the number of press releases boasting about victories.